I was 16 years old when a girl I barely knew whispered a secret so heavy it split the air, and it changed my life forever. We were sitting in world history at Southwood High School in Shreveport, Louisiana, and Beth, she wasn't a friend per se, she was just a classmate who I rarely even spoke to. We'd never hung out outside of school. Heck, we barely even made small talk. But on this one particular day, Beth leaned over and she whispered something I'll never forget. She said, "I don't know what to do. And I've never told anyone this, but my father is having sex with me. And he's been doing it for 5 years." And that was it, 2 sentences, and then silence. I remember thinking, what do I do with something like that? I have no training. I mean, I wasn't even old enough to vote. But I was old enough to know this was not okay, and old enough to feel the weight of her words settle into my chest. So I sat there frozen, and my eyes were on the whiteboard in front of me, but my mind was racing. What do you say to that? I mean, what do you do with something like that? I'd never heard anything like it, and I'd never even thought something like that could happen. And suddenly it wasn't a rumor or a story that you overheard. It was real. It was whispered from a girl sitting 2 feet from me in a dusty high school classroom. And she trusted me with that information. I didn't feel ready. I didn't feel wise or brave or anything but scared. But I looked at her and I said, "Beth, this is wrong. You have to call the police. You don't have to keep this a secret anymore." She just nodded and that was it. And I don't know if she ever made that call, but I do know this. That moment, something changed inside of me. And years later, looking back, I realized that that was one of the first times someone came to me for more than a listening ear. Maybe they saw something in me before I even knew it existed. A kind of steadiness, a calm confidence, the kind of strength that made it safe to tell the truth and believe they might actually be okay on the other side of it. Beth, she wasn't the first person to open up to me, and she wouldn't be the last. At 16, I didn't have the language for it back then, but I had enough sense to see what was wrong and enough courage to say something. And even as a teenager, people trusted me. Frankly, they still do. Beth wasn't the first person to open up to me, and she wouldn't be the last, not because I had answers, but because I was there, I was present, and I listened without judging, not running away from hard things. And that thread, it's followed me every step of the way. So now 30 years later, 30 plus years later, I've turned that superpower into a calling. I'm the founder and president of Opstra, a company built on leadership that says leadership isn't about control, but it's about connection. That people don't follow titles, they follow trust. We help teams function by teaching leaders to lead from the inside out. We bring emotional intelligence, personality dynamics, and practical training to real people who want real results. But more than that, those people who want to feel whole in the process. Because I believe this to my core, that people don't grow where they're judged. They grow where they're seen, where they're safe, and where they're supported. And that gift, that ability to hold space for others and help them step into something better, it started in that classroom, in that conversation with a girl who told me the most painful truth she'd ever carried. I might have been 16, but I listened, and I didn't look away. And that was the beginning of everything I would later become. It's why today senior leaders pull me to the side after keynotes and tell me their own stories. Why teams open up and get real within minutes of a workshop. And why people like Greg D'Arcy, a civil engineer in Texas, once told me, "Amy, you have a way of making people feel more confident in themselves and in their abilities." And I appreciate that about you. It's why they trust me. And that trust, it creates movement. It opens doors, it changes things, and that is my superpower. That's why I do this work. Not just to inspire, but to truly transform. was in my very own bedroom, and my husband was dragging me across the room by my hair. The worst part, this wasn't the first time something like that had happened. That moment, the physical pain, the fear, the rage, the shame, it seared into my memory. But what sticks with me even more was what it did to my mind, because long before he had ever laid hands on me, he had been chipping away at my self-confidence, making me question what I saw and what I knew, and eventually, who I even was. And here's the thing most people don't expect when they hear my story. I didn't grow up in a broken home. I grew up in actually what some people would call the picture-perfect Leave It to Beaver family. My parents are still married today, almost 60 years after they said I do, and I never once saw them yell or fight. Heck, I never even saw them cuss. My dad was in sales, and he loved photography, and he took me on daddy-daughter dates. He'd check me out of school about once a year, and he'd just take me out to eat and go shopping. We went on bike rides, we ran around the neighborhood, and he even tried his best to teach me how to play tennis. How'd that work out, Dad? But most of all, he never let me forget that I was loved. And my mom worked as a secretary, and she ended her career at the school board. She turned down promotion after promotion, not because she couldn't handle more responsibility, but because she chose us. She chose her family. She painted and she baked and she sewed my dance uniforms. And one Easter, she even made me a homemade With Love dress. And I had never felt more beautiful in my entire life than I did when I wore that dress. So I was surrounded by love, stability, and safety. And it makes me question, how did I end up with a man who abused me? That's a question I wrestled with for a long time. And if you've ever been in something like that, you know it doesn't start with a punch. It starts with a subtle comment, a question that starts to plant a seed of doubt, maybe in an apology after crossing a line, but only because you made him upset. You find yourself staying because you know who they could be, because you keep remembering the version of them that you thought was real. And you hold on to hope long after it stops holding on to you. But here's what I've learned. Where you find yourself is not where you have to stay. And it doesn't matter if you came from a loving home like I did, or whether you practically had to raise yourself. It doesn't matter whether your pain comes from a person or a workplace, maybe a failed dream or something you don't even like to talk about. But you still get to choose. You get to say, this is not how my story ends. And me, I stayed longer than I should have, sure. I believed in his potential more than I believed in my own reality. And I take ownership of that, not to shame myself, but to remind myself of my own power. Because I made a decision. I said, this will never happen again. And today, I'm married to a man who honors me and who protects me and who sees me. And I've built a life and a business grounded in that same truth, that you can choose again. You can heal, you can rise, and maybe, most importantly, you can lead from your scars. So that's what I help people do now. At Opstra, we help leaders step into who they truly are, beyond the title, beyond the pressure to perform. We help them lead with the kind of wisdom that only comes from lived experiences, the ones who faced real challenges, who've owned their growth, and who come back stronger. We don't just teach leadership. We help people lead with confidence and with clarity and with conviction because sometimes of what they've overcome. Their story does not disqualify them, it actually equips them. And at Opstra, we help leaders step into who they are beyond that title and beyond the pressure to perform. We help people lead with the kind of wisdom that only can come from lived experience. Those who faced real challenges and who've owned their growth and who come back stronger, we don't just teach leadership. We help people lead with confidence and clarity and conviction, sometimes because of what they've overcome. Because leadership isn't about perfection, it's about presence. After 9 interviews, you'd think I'd celebrate. But instead, I sat in my car just silent because I was staring at the one thing that I had worked so hard for, my offer letter. Just the day before, I had my 9th interview with McGraw-Hill Higher Education. That's right, 9. This wasn't just any company. This was a publishing giant, that prestigious and powerful one that consistently ranked at or near the top of the best places to work in the United States. The very one that was nearly impossible to break into. In fact, one of the reps who was hired alongside of me said the interview process at McGraw-Hill was even more intense than the interviews he had to join the CIA. And he wasn't joking. But I made the cut. I was hired as a sales rep in Louisiana. Entry level technically, but for me, it was a launch pad. And I ran. I climbed, I hustled, and I earned my way from just being a sales rep in Louisiana to leading teams that stretched from Texas to Florida, all the way up to Kentucky. And I was flying high, man. I mean, the title, the salaries, the success, and on paper it looked like I had it all together. But one day I was sitting in my home office and working late as usual, and something happened. I paused. I stared at the screen and I just froze. And this question hit me like a freight train. What have I missed? And I answered that question. I'd missed my daughter Erin's 16th birthday. I had missed her homecoming, her senior ring ceremony, and I'd missed my son's stories of his overseas mission trips and his own emotional journey. I missed times with my girlfriends, and those girls were my lifelines, and I'd missed even pieces of myself. You know, I had chased everything they told me that mattered, even a position with another company for even more money. But on this particular day, I realized I had actually left something behind that mattered more than any of that. I mean, my own mom, she worked for the school board and turned down promotion after promotion just so she could be present with her family. And here I was, accepting every opportunity, every raise, every title, even if it cost me everything else. And it did. I had the house, I had the car, the title, the paycheck, but I didn't actually have my peace. So I made a decision. I thought there's got to be more than this. And I sat down and made a list. I made a list of all the things that I had always wanted to do just for me. It wasn't your usual bucket list. I mean, I wanted to walk on fire, jump out of an airplane. I wanted to travel, and I wanted to reclaim some time with my son and my daughter. I also wanted to reconnect with my friends, and basically I wanted to recenter my life. It wasn't easy, but the moment I decided to stop sacrificing what matters for what impresses, that's when everything changed. Because sometimes you have to slow down in order to rise up. Sometimes the best investment you can make is in yourself. And sometimes success without wholeness isn't success at all. It's actually a trap. But the truth is, you don't have to keep performing for a life that's not fulfilling you. You get to choose to come home to yourself and to live differently. And you get to define success on your own terms and build that life you don't have to run away from. If I could sit on the couch with someone who was 21, maybe even the girl I used to be, I wouldn't start with advice. I'd actually start by looking her eye to eye. Because at 22, I didn't need a lecture. I needed someone to tell me that I wasn't crazy for what I was feeling. At 22, I was a single mom with a brand new baby boy. I just moved from Nashville back to Shreveport, and I was trying to finish school, and I was trying to get my life together. And truthfully, I was lost. I was engaged to a man I knew in my gut who I wasn't supposed to marry. But the night before the wedding rehearsal, I called my mom and I told her that I wanted to call the wedding off. And she said, Amy, don't do that. We have people from all over the country in town, and it's too late to call it off. But what she didn't know, because I didn't tell her, was how bad it already was. In fact, even as my dad was walking me down the aisle, he looked at me and said, you know, it's not too late to change your mind. He could sense it. He could. But I didn't trust myself to make that decision. So I pushed down my instincts, my fear, and my truth. And I walked straight into a life that would later hurt me in ways you couldn't imagine. So if I could go back and just say one thing, it would be this. I would say trust yourself. When your gut tells you something's not right, chances are it isn't. And when your body tenses and your breath shortens, when that peace disappears, that's your warning sign. Listen to it and trust yourself. The second thing I'd say is do the hard things while you're young. Hard work is not optional. It's just a matter of when. You can grind early and build a life of ease, or you can avoid the hard work now and pay double for it later. I mean, I've done both, and I choose the hard early every single time. And finally, I'd say do not let fear hold you back. For years, people told me I should start a podcast and that I should speak and that I should write. And I waited way too long before I started doing those things. I mean, what if I messed up? What if I didn't sound polished enough? What if I didn't look the part? But here's what I've learned. Fear doesn't leave. I mean, it's going to be there, whether you move forward or not. You just have to decide that it's not going to get the final say. So to every 21, 22-year-old out there, I'd say this. Trust yourself. Do the hard things now. And stop giving fear the keys to your future, because your instincts are not broken. Your work will be worth it. And your voice was never too much. That still, soft voice inside of you, it's always exactly what you needed to hear. When leadership breaks down, companies suffer. And it's the people who feel it the most. Teams get stuck and cultures crumble. Productivity is even slowed down by miscommunication, misalignment, and mistrust. And that's where we come in. At Offshore, we're helping organizations build leaders who build other leaders, not just managers, not just performers, no. We're helping build real leaders who know how to develop people, who connect across differences, and who drive results rooted in trust. We provide customized leadership training that addresses the core issues within your organization, training that can be delivered either on-site or virtually. Here's what that looks like in real life. So one company, let's call them ABC Corporation, they came to us in the middle of leadership chaos. People weren't just quitting the job, they were walking away from a culture that no longer served them. Engagement was slipping, managers were burned out, they were stretched thin, and they were stuck in reaction mode. And more than anything, they lacked trust. Not because they didn't care, but because no one had ever shown them how to lead through connection, not just direction. So we stepped in and we listened, and we designed a leadership experience rooted in their actual needs, not some prepackaged program. We walked them through a system that builds trust, helped restore their communication, and equipped their leaders with real actionable tools. And what happened next? People didn't just stay, they actually started to thrive. Team dynamics shifted, accountability rose, and culture, they didn't just improve it, they reclaimed it. And then there was Mark. Mark wasn't sent by a company. He actually came on his own. He was a mid-level leader with a fire inside of his gut, but he had a ceiling above his head, that glass ceiling. And he knew he was meant for more. He didn't just have the tools he needed to lead himself where he envisioned himself going. So he signed on for some leadership development, and he walked away with confidence and clarity, and he walked away with tools that was more than just head knowledge, things that he could implement that day. He gained clarity and confidence and a toolkit rooted in purpose. And he also gained the mindset that helped him launch 2 promotions in under 5 years. And now he's leading the #1 region in this company. Why? Because it all started with him and his decision to take action, to invest in himself, and to lead from the inside out, anchored in purpose. Leadership isn't just about a title, and it doesn't have to start in the boardroom. It actually starts inside of you. So what we're building is not just better teams. We're building a new kind of leadership, one that's rooted in trust, and it's built on courage, and it's fueled by purpose. And we're doing it with companies who are ready to rise and with people who are done waiting for permission. Leadership, it's not about a title. It's about you.